how do we encourage lots of people who have not joined our national tribe, who have not fostered good relationships with us, who will not reproduce our civilization, how do we encourage those people to leave our country, go back to their own countries, hopefully build those up, we can check on in them in a few hundred years, but leave us in peace and prosperity. Thank you very much.
I mean, that's a very simple question. You want people to leave your country, don't interfere in their affairs. It's so ironic that Britain had colonized most of the world for centuries upon centuries, destabilized the region, destabilized their own, destabilized the country that they colonized. You want them to go back to their own original countries of origin? Leave them alone. Let them, specifically the Muslims, do not interfere in the Muslim world. Let the Muslims choose their own future. Let the Muslims choose their own political system. Let the Muslims choose their own ideology that they want to live by, and they'll go back home. It's as simple as that.
In parts of the Islamic world, cousin marriage is still between like 40 and 80%, and it's still quite high in the Pakistani Biradiri clans that populate various towns and cities like Bradford, Luton, Blackburn, across the UK. And so what this means is a clannish mentality, a us versus them mentality, is entrenched by family structure and by faith. And
so now the reason why, according to him, that people are not accepting British values, or as he likes to term it, British tradition, English tradition, is because basically all the Pakistanis and Bradford and Luton are inbreds, and because you're inbred, because you're marrying your cousins, you got this kind of this cultish family mentality whereby you can't even look at the rest of civilization because they're not part of your family. I wonder who the kings and queens of England have been marrying for centuries to keep royalty within their bloodline.
Because Islam mapped onto the existing clannish structures of 7th century Arabia and created a kind of super clan, an Ummah, which united all of these families under one banner, one Muslim race. And so it extended the remit of moral consideration beyond just the family, beyond just the clan, but to fellow Muslims, but unfortunately not to other faiths.
So what's interesting now, honestly, he has an issue with this idea of Ummah. And this idea of Ummah has really troubled, British politicians and intellectuals and Western politicians and intellectuals for a long time, because it is a very, very powerful idea. It is the idea that Muslims, wherever they are, who share the same belief, who share the same faith, who have the same creed, are one people. They are one nation separate to all others. This is the way that, this is the understanding of one ummah in Islam. And it's interesting that he keeps talking about Christianity and Christian values and this kind of stuff. Christians also have this idea of Christian brotherhood or Christian brethren. In fact, all religions have this idea of an affinity to other people of the same religion. But when it comes to Islam, when Muslims believe in this idea of ummah that transcends boundaries, that transcends borders, that transcends ethnicities and histories and languages and cultures, all of a sudden it's deemed as this kind of old, barbaric, ancient kind of value.
And so if this mentality that you can't make friends with people outside your family, your clan, your faith, and your ummah persists in these areas in Britain, as documented by Muslims themselves, like Ed Hussein in the book Among the Mosques, then it's hard to say that we can have the same civilization if we keep inputting this mentality, this theory of mind, this faith into our country, and the demographic grows where now Muhammad is the most common baby name for newborns in Britain. I think it means that we're going to have a deeply culturally unrecognizable nation if this trend continues.
Basically, he's saying that the Muslims are not going to be integrating, they are growing in number, and the fact that they have not adopted British culture or British tradition is a problem. So either get them to accept it, get them to adopt British culture, or get out of the country. This is basically what he is saying. And that actually shows you the failure of Western civilization. I mean, if your ideology, if your civilization is so strong, if it's so convincing, if it's so intellectually and rationally in agreement with the mind, well, then people would accept it. But they haven't. And that shows you the weakness of their ideology. People are not convinced by liberalism. People are not convinced by, the secular, irreligious way of life.
Ed Hussein holds this opinion, himself a second-generation immigrant and Muslim, but he estimates as a former jihadist that about 3% of the global population themselves are jihadists. He used caliphists, the people that want to see the reconstruction of the caliphate.
Hang on a minute. People who believe in the reconstruction of a caliphate, of a khilafah, he's made that synonymous now with being a jihadist, whatever that means, whatever his understanding is about that. Majority of Muslims in the world believe not only in a khilafah, in a caliphate historically, the khilafah of Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali, radiallahu anhum, but the majority, I don't know, 95% of Muslims believe not only in the, the historical caliphate, but in a future caliphate. Yeah, every Muslim believes in Imam Mahdi, yeah, who is going to be the leader of this caliphate. Imam Mahdi is going to be the caliph of the caliphate. Every Muslim believes that there is going to be a return of an Islamic khilafah. Yeah, every Muslim believes that the end of time, or the ends of time will not come until the Muslim world has its khilafah once again. But this chap here seems to think that that makes everybody a quote-unquote jihadist, whatever that means.
Given the Muslim population, that's still 50 million people worldwide, and we're currently importing lots of them from the third world, from the Muslim world, and not exactly screening them for their views at the border. So we are undoubtedly importing and home-growing jihadists.
You see the fear-mongering? We are importing jihadists that are coming over to the UK unchecked. What are you talking about? It's fear-mongering, it's GBNews, it's riling up the population that, oh my God, you're under attack, you're going to be invaded by these people, they are unchecked, they hate you, they want to attack you. It's a load of rubbish. It is honestly a load of lies.
So they wage a war on what they call fitna, and this is a word meaning temptation, occasions to sin. So everything from...
So now Muslims who are trying to fight against, quote-unquote, the fitna, or the temptations of life, here the problem was, what is it? What does he have a problem with? What kind of temptations does he have an issue with Muslims combating, with Muslims trying to combat against?
Going on social media and in mixed sex spaces to pornography, alcohol, shaking hands with women.
This is the level of thinking. Yeah, the so-called flipping self-proclaimed Shaykh al-Islam, where he got all of his information from BBC Bite-Size. Oh my God, Muslims are trying to fight temptation against pornography, against social media, against alcohol, against shaking hands with women. Like, this is what is really, really threatening British culture, British tradition, British values. This is how fickle your own ideology is. This is how fickle your own way of life is. That people who are not accepting pornography or social media or alcohol, then they are deemed unfit and unintegrated. They are not deemed fit to live in British society. This is the weakness of their way of life.
And the only way to, if they have been westernized and they revert back to the faith, the only way to absolve themselves of sin is something like a jihadist attack, a suicide bombing. It's not like in...
Mad. Crazy. So if somebody has been affected by his words, the Western way of life, they become liberalized or they become secularized, and now they want to, as he puts it, revert back to Islam in the sense of forgiveness. If somebody wants forgiveness, yeah? If a Muslim who's not been living an Islamic way of life wants to revert back to an Islamic way of life, what does he do? He's got to put on a vest, according to this chap here, BBC Bite-Size Sheikh. He's got to put on a vest and he's got to attack innocent people in a shopping mall. This is what we're expected to believe. Yeah, this is the level of research, the level of sincerity of the likes of GBNews and co. What a joke. What a joke. Whenever have you been to a masjid and the imam is saying, oh, you know what, you've sinned, you haven't been living an Islamic way of life. Basically, brother, the only way that you can get salvation in this life and the next, the only way that Allah, God, is going to forgive you is by putting on a vest, strapping whatever to it, and doing a madness in the city centre. What a joke. What a lie. In fact, I'm sure speechless.
We've had Dr. Taj Hargay speak to Martin Daubney on GB News about how mosques and madrasas are preaching to Muslim men to see white women and girls as second-class citizens because of their supposed sexual promiscuity by Islamic standards, and so this has fed into things like the grooming gangs or just generally disparaging views of their British host majority neighbours.
Crazy, crazy. So basically, apparently, because Islam kind of renders non-Muslim Western women as promiscuous and un-Islamic and dirty, then it's that very same Islam that's promoting grooming gangs. Show me, show me evidence of a Muslim grooming gang member using Islam, using an ayah of Quran, using a hadith of the Prophet, peace be upon him, as some kind of excuse of his actions. Show me. Show me any Muslim grooming gang member that has said, yeah, you know what, the reason why I did what I did is because, Islam renders these women to be, promiscuous and therefore halal for me to do X, Y, Z. What? It's a lie. It is a lie. And again, they always love to just throw in this, when we're speaking about Islam, let's just mention this word grooming gangs. Yeah, 85% of grooming gang members are white. Do they also get their motivation from Islam?
That no matter whether or not you're a Sunni or a Shia, that the difference being that both of them want a caliphate, no matter what dynamic you fall alongside, the Muslim community elders feel either sufficiently compromised by the more radical elements of their mosques, or they themselves are just biding their time and waiting to fold themselves into the caliphate. Bradford Muslim, on whether or not a caliphate is coming, he said that, well, I just tell my congregation, bide your time, learn your Quran, get good jobs, enter the office of state, and eventually the caliphate will come.
How many times has this person mentioned Khilafah, Caliphate? In the beginning of his interview, he talks about, how is it that we can basically send all these Muslims back? And that's by not interfering in the Muslim world and allowing the Muslim world to choose their own political system. But the West realized that if you do allow the Muslim world to choose their own political system, if you don't interfere in the Muslim world, then very, very quickly what will end up happening is that the Muslims will end up implementing the system of Islam, an Islamic caliphate. And they realize as much as anybody else that historically and even in the future, a united Muslim world under one central political authority is going to compete in their interest, is going to compete with them economically, militarily, from a resource point of view, from a trade point of view, from an economic point of view, and especially from an ideological point of view. So they've kind of put themselves in a catch-22. Either you do interfere in the Muslim world, in which case, because of the instability that causes, you're going to have Muslims from the Muslim world coming into the West, which they don't like, or you don't interfere in the Muslim world, allow Muslims to implement their own political system, which is going to be a caliphate, by the way, and that is how Muslims from the West go back to the East. So pick your pick. Yeah, what is it that you want to do? Don't now complain that a few decades after the height of the British Empire, you are now in a social and economic problem. And what are you doing? You're blaming migrants and you're blaming Muslims. And honestly, it's a joke. It's a farce. And I hope people can see through that.